Good afternoon and welcome to our Zambia Election Dialogue series, where we'll be focusing on latest developments and events surrounding the upcoming elections, which are due to be held in Zambia on the 12th of August. My name is Chris Maroleng, and I am the Executive Director of Good Governance Africa, which is a research think tank that is based in Rosebank, Johannesburg, South Africa. In this particular discussion, I will be joined by one of the upcoming presidential candidates in this election, and that is none other than Bishop Trevor Mwamba. I'll introduce him to the conversation, but maybe a little bit about Good Governance Africa itself. Good Governance Africa, as you might know, is an applied policy research think tank that is focused on promoting good governance across the African continent. And we do so through our research deliverables and, of course, through lobbying directly both public and private sector partners to engage and follow this concept of good governance. The concept of good governance in and of itself is particularly important for the topic that we will be entering into and the discussion that we'll be having with Bishop Mwamba, because good governance in and of itself, simplistically described by us here at Good Governance Africa, talks about who gets what, when, and how. It's about the authoritative allocation of resources. Elections are one of the processes under which this authoritative process is carried out. And certainly, we will be in discussion with Bishop Mwamba about how he intends to introduce, hopefully, good governance, should he be elected in the upcoming elections in Zambia. So, without further ado, let me introduce to you my interlocutor for today, and that is Bishop Trevor Mwamba. Bishop Mwamba, thank you so much for joining us on this dialogue series today.
Thank you very much, Chris. It's a great pleasure to be with you this afternoon.
Thank you. So let me just declare right up front, Bishop, that I have known you for quite some time. In actual fact, I've known you since I was a little boy, aged around 10 years old in Botswana, where my father was also an Anglican priest like yourself. And you had just come into Botswana at the time as the legal advisor to the Archbishop of Central Africa, Khotso Makudu, and also as his chaplain, as I came to know you at the time. So it's quite interesting now to see you entering into the political realm, so to speak, in your country of Zambia. Why, Bishop? Why would a man of the cloth, so to speak, enter into politics?
First, Chris, let me just say, you make me feel so ancient. Oh my God, Kevin. but now we look like twins. So I'm not aged anyway. Yes, I remember. And it was great, of course, meeting you then and your dear father, a great man. Yes, well, how do I explain it? Let me start by quoting a title of a book written by a great American theologian and a preacher. His name is Frederick Buechner. Now, his book, it's a memoir, actually. It's about his life. And he entitled it, The Sacred Journey. And I was always moved by that title because in a way it explains my journey and how I ended up in Botswana, as you rightly introduced me coming in to work with the Archbishop. And I ended up in Botswana because of that sacred journey, taking me to an amazing place. And how does it start? Now, it's very important because that defines me and defines where I am at this point in time going into politics. You see, before I was born, my mother tells me, and she told me this after I'd been ordained, is that she thought she would never have children. She had a miscarriage and miscarriages. And so she prayed to God and made a sort of bargain that if I was born a boy, I'll be dedicated to God's service. And sure enough, there I was born. And she had 7 children after that. So there were 8 of us siblings. But growing up, my mother never, ever at all intimated or pushed me to go into the church. And my father was a diplomat, came back to Zambia, and I went to university. I studied law. And my intention then was, of course, to pursue a life in diplomacy, a life in law, and eventually politics. But when I finished my law studies, I felt drawn to the church. And I couldn't resist that. You know, it was an impulse, a feeling. And so I ended up going to Oxford to read theology. And I was ordained at St. Luke's, Chelsea in London. And then I came back to Zambia. And that's where it begins. So when I arrived, and this is what happened, I went to see my mother where she worked at the University Teaching Hospital. She was an administrator there. And I sat opposite her, dressed in my clerical attire, and she looked at me, and this is what she said. She said, "Oh, my son, I am so happy that you're a priest. Because you see, before you were born, I asked God that if you would be dedicated to his service." And then she said this, "And now I am so happy I can die a happy woman." And tragically, Chris, within a year, my mother died in a car accident. And then my life has been this sense of being directed, this sacred journey. So when I ended up in Botswana, it was precisely because of that. Archbishop Makudu, who was then the Archbishop, knowing me, appointed me and all the other bishops to be the legal advisor and secretary to them. That's how I ended up there. Now, how does it take me into politics? The same thing. This sacred journey has been one which has enabled me to meet amazing people, great leaders, great thinkers, entrepreneurs. And it has formed me all these many years to the degree that here I am because I have felt that same pull, that same draw that God, who allowed me to go into the church, has now pointed me to this direction, saying, this is also part of your sacred journey, your sacred ministry. Go into politics and use all the skills I have given you. So for me, there is no contradiction, that it's an amazing direction or heading to God's purpose in our lives, and especially in my life. That's how I end up here.
Fascinating, Bishop, especially this reference to a sacred journey. But I would argue that the journey that you are going into right now is taking you into what would be described as a very murky area of social life, and that is politics. Are you ready for this, Bishop?
Absolutely, totally ready. In fact, I think all my life I've been prepared for this. But then you see it's a definition. You use the word murky and all that, and it says, is politics really murky? My view is that no, politics is not murky. It is the people within it who make it murky. Politics on its own, it's a very honorable and noble profession. It's about service, truly defined. And the great politicians, and these are some of the politicians who I have met in my life, have been very noble people. I mean, take, for example, in the context of South Africa, when we think of the great leader, Madiba, President Mandela, what sort of person he was. We wouldn't define him as murky in any way, you know, involved in the murky. No, but he was out to do good. You think of others just right now, our beloved president, the founding father and president of Zambia, Dr. Kenneth David Kaunda, who recently died. Now, here's a great man of integrity, of service, and we wouldn't describe him as murky, but all these people brought something of their character, of their integrity, of their principles. And that's what I see in my case, that entering into this profession, it will be adding value. Let me say something in the context of what a French poet, his name is Charles Péguy, wrote. And he has a poem entitled God's Dream. It's a beautiful thing. But elsewhere, Charles Péguy said this, that everything begins in mysticism and ends in politics.
Yes.
And by that, what he meant, and he was a Catholic, a devout Catholic, what he meant was that, you see, to be engaged in politics, and politics is about life, it's about people, one must be engaged in God's love. It is God who embraces everything. So when you are embraced by this love of God, then you find your concern about the way things are out there. And that, in a way, informs your outlook to politics. It's about service. And when you think about it, that's what Jesus Christ was about. That Jesus comes in our midst. He's a God showing us how things ought to be. Love God with all your heart, with all your strength, with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. Do unto others as you like them to do unto you. So politics is about being good to one another and living those moral values. So that's how I see it, that no, we need to bring into politics this morality, this true sense of service, of improving the livelihood and living standards of others. That's how I see it. So it's a great challenge and a great adventure for me.
Indeed, what an adventure. But others might actually, especially your critics, say that you are coming into this adventure from a very elite or elitist perspective. You are perceived by many of your critics as being slightly misplaced, maybe out of touch from Zambian politics, having spent a large part of your career outside of Zambia. And therefore, many are asking and criticizing the fact that maybe you are doing this simply for power or for the status and the accoutrements of power that come with running for such high office. What's your response to that, Bishop?
Oh, not at all, not at all. I think first, I'm a churchman. I come from context of the church. And as I mentioned earlier, my initial training, my profession, of course, was law. So I could have gone into law and made money, and I could have gone into business and made more money, you know, all that sort of sense of about status. But no, I chose to pursue a path, the sacred journey path of service for God's people. And the church is where the people are. The church is where people hurt. The church is where people feel. So the church is very much a part of the society at its best, at its worst, and at its, you know, potential, if you like. So what I'm saying in this context, therefore, no, the elitist approach, no, does not really apply in my case. I've worked in villages. I've taken services under trees. I have roughed it, and that's it. But here's the most important thing about my time out of my country and working in other places, other countries. I was in Botswana, as you mentioned, but I worked in England and in Europe, and I've been in many places. But it's about exposure, but it's also about the network that I have built up and the people I have interacted with, that I'm bringing all this back to Zambia. And my network with all these people remains. There was a time, actually, when I worked for Standard Chartered Bank. So in the financial world, in the banking world, at a very high level, I mean, I did 3 different roles as the head of legal and compliance and head of corporate affairs and secretary to the board within Botswana, within Africa, and of course in England, as I have been exposed greatly. So I bring all this back, and this will be very beneficial to my country, to my people, to have a person with such a network. So that's how I see it.
Interesting perspective, Bishop, particularly when you consider the fact that the very same critics then would look at the political party or movement that you have chosen to be part of, which is that of UNIP. As you would be aware, and I'm sure you'll tell us a little bit more about this, UNIP is seen as being the party of liberation in Zambia, having been the party of the founding president, known as the father of the nation, the late great Kenneth Kaunda. However, in the latter periods towards the transition away from UNIP to the MMD, accusations were made that the economic policy, and in actual fact, the moral standing of UNIP as a legitimate party had suffered significant demise and decay. How do you respond to this? Why UNIP in the first place? And what do you say about this criticism of UNIP as a spent force, a political movement that has lost its way in contemporary Zambian politics?
Everything has its context, Chris. And yes, you're right. Of course, UNIP is this great party. It's a liberation party which ushered in Zambia's independence. And we must begin there in terms of its greatness, that this is the longest political party in Zambia. And it is the party of all parties, if you like, in the sense, in terms of the liberation dimension. After independence, President Kaunda was a Pan-Africanist, and he opened the country because of his Pan-African view of life to all the other liberation movements to come and headquarter in Zambia. And so he supported them passionately and with a sense of care and love. To the degree that, of course, you had ANC, you had SWAPO, you had ZAPU, you had Frelimo, that Zambia paid a very heavy penalty for that, and in terms of human costs and as well as economically, the sanctions which were imposed, the attacks that were made, the infrastructure. So you're looking at a party that has not just been the party for Zambia's independence, but the party that helped liberate the rest of Africa. So its importance is vital to uphold. So moving forward, as you rightly said, later on, there was a falling away. Mistakes were made. There were mistakes here and there in terms of economic outlines, outlooks, and so on. But again, those mistakes would have been made in the context of trying to build a nation. But it's the leadership of UNIP that intrigues me and has drawn me into it. And this leadership was the type of leaders who were dedicated to the development of the country and its peoples. And it's a leadership that was about selfless service. It was a leadership that was based on integrity. It was a leadership that's based on moral values. And in fact, UNIP had its ideology and philosophy of what we call humanism, which simply puts humanity or people at the center of all things. And therefore, whatever economic policies are made, whatever political policies are made, whatever social policies were made, were all made to benefit humanity at the center. That I hold to greatly, and that is one of the reasons I decided to join this party and was elected its president. And we want to build on that foundation of about focusing on the welfare of people, and the Zambian people, the African people, and the world people. And from that context, it becomes a very place for me.
I'm going to have to push you here a little bit around what you describe as some mistakes were done, particularly towards the end of the governing period of UNIP under the late President Kenneth Kaunda, because here it really talks to the question of ideology. Are you trying to put forward to us a view that the ideology was the mistake in UNIP? And if that is what you're trying to say, then what is the ideology of UNIP now? And how do you locate yourself within this ideological debate in your party, UNIP?
No. The ideology of UNIP has always been constant. Actually, it had nothing to do with that at all. It's been very constant. It was about serving the people and trying to develop a country. But if any mistakes were made, it was in the context of the times itself, which brought in a certain approach to development, a socialist approach to development. So certain decisions were made within the influences, external influences, which were influencing the rest of nations and decision-making processes at the time. We must understand that this is a time of the Cold War. And so there was a divide between West, East, capitalist or communist, and that sort of thing. And so we were caught up in that. And then certain decisions, of course, which were made did not augur well for our country's development. It was within that context.
And Bishop, do you subscribe very directly to the concept of socialism? Does UNIP still subscribe to a socialist approach towards development, as you put it?
Not at all. I think UNIP's position and my position going forward was always a pragmatic one. You see, when we talk about decisions that have been being made at the time, take, for example, the building of the Tanzara Railway. UNIP and the government actually maintained what we call an unaligned approach to the political context. They didn't want to be caught up in this battle of the titans. And so what would normally happen is that we would approach the West for assistance, for, guidance and so on. And if the West did not agree to whatever request was being made, then they'll go to the East. And hence, building the Tanzara Railway, many people don't realize that we went first to the Americans, the British, and the Canadians, and they said no. Then the Chinese said yes. So it's this pragmatic approach. So it has always been that pragmatic approach that is important, I think, in developing development. And it's something that one would want to build on, a pragmatic approach that benefits the people of Zambia, but not one that is dominates or destroys us, our identity.
So, Bishop, at this stage, I also want to invite the various audiences that are watching us on various platforms to really submit your questions via the chat application if you're logged into the platform that we are holding this webinar. And talking of questions, we have a very interesting question here from one of the viewers of this webinar, and that's to you, Bishop. It's from Mulifi Libone. He says there have been reports on bribes for political elites and celebrities in order to sway the outcome. How sure are we that this election will be free and fair? And I think what he's also saying there, Bishop, is that you are also not one of those alleged political elites that have been bought off by one or the other dominant political force in your country.
I hear you. Look, I think in any context, it's always about integrity. And I leave it to the wisdom of the Zambian people, as far as they can exercise that free vote, that they will know, they know better, and they can read these people. And so I'm coming in as this, and this is what I am. I'm a churchman. I'm a person of integrity, of honesty. I have no monies. All my life has been about serving God's people. So I come in squeaky clean. And by that, it means that I shall also ensure that my policies are about being squeaky clean. I shall ensure they're about transparency. I shall ensure that the Zambian people benefit from a wise leadership, an understanding leadership, a competent leadership, all that. So I'm coming in from that context. But in context of people being bought here and there, people know these things and people can read between the lines. And so I would say, well, here you have a candidate who is squeaky clean. No matter how much you try to dig into the past, into the closet, you'll find nothing corrupt. And that's what we must be about. Incorruptible.
Incorruptible, squeaky clean. Let's talk a bit about some of those policies that you refer to, that you are most likely to engage in should you be elected as president of Zambia through this election. And let's start off with economic policy. We are aware right now that Zambia faces a significant public debt issue, and that public debt issue has seen Zambia actually defaulting in its payments of its debt to the IMF. We recently heard about this in November 2020, where it was announced that Zambia had defaulted. What are you going to do with regards to economic policy in a situation like the one that Zambia is faced with, of significant public debt, a requirement to enhance expenditure towards COVID relief and the like? And I can go on and on. What will be the centerpiece of your public policy? And more importantly, what are you going to do about this outstanding issue of this odious public debt?
Thank you very much, Chris, for that question. Indeed. I'm reminded of, you remember when Clinton was running for president, and his lead strategist, James Carville, came up with this phrase, the economy is stupid. The economy is stupid. And that's it. For me, this is the elephant in the room. We have to tackle this. And as you have rightly alluded, and in a question about the public debt, it's a matter which we must handle, and we must address, and we must resolve. One of the first things, of course, one would want to do is it's about negotiating with the IMF and the World Bank and other international institutions, our creditors, is to renegotiate and reschedule our whatever amounts we will be owing. At the moment, I'm not aware or fully aware of how much is owed. I don't know if anybody knows, but we will find out. And we don't know how deep we are in the hole. So once we know what the status is, then we will seek a way of addressing this matter, of resolving it. And we will do so, one, in the context of absolute honesty in approaching this matter. Mm-hmm. Honesty in regard to the Zambian people, honesty in regard to our partners, honesty in regard to the business community, honesty indeed in regard to how we work out the solutions. And that brings us to the issue of transparency. Transparency. The people of Zambia, everybody will need to know what has happened and what is happening and how we can deal with this matter. Yep. Transparency. Then, of course, we want to get back to what I alluded to in terms of renegotiating, rescheduling. Approach it in the context of the best faith negotiations. No backroom deals, no cutting corners. But everybody should know that this is where we are and this is how we must go about solving this issue. So the economy becomes very paramount to me in terms of resolving this. And we will be able to do it because Zambia, as many people know, and all our creditors and partners, is a very richly resourced country. It's endowed with minerals and with so much wealth that we should not be where we are. But we will do it together. And I think the other important important thing in addressing the whole economic thing, and in my view, is get the best minds to deal with this.
Yeah.
Get the best minds to deal with this. And so I will be looking at who we have as Zambians within Zambia, outside Zambia, who are Zambians who can come and help us address these matters. So transparency will be very important. That's about making sure that the round peg is not put in a square peg, and let those people who know what to do deal with this matter. We will provide the foundation.
Very, very comprehensive responses, and really clearly indicating a move towards a more transparent and accountable administration should you be elected into office. However, we've got a great question here from a colleague of mine known as Lloyd Coates. And he says, what if austerity measures are the ultimate requirement from the IMF? Are you also of the ilk of leaders who say what is required to address this issue is to tighten up the belts, austerity, and really to see a reduction maybe in public expenditure in things such as welfare and the public sector wage bill? What's your perspective on that?
That's a very good question. Remember, in the context of renegotiating, rescheduling, and that process, that's where we'll be dealing and handling those matters. I think what we need to arrive at as, as creditors and other partners or stakeholders is that we need to arrive at a solution that benefits everybody. We don't want to be tightening belts, and people are people, and especially the poor. I mean, if you tighten the belts on the poor, you kill them off. So it's about negotiating in a transparent and honest way. And that is a matter I would have to address, faced with, knowing the extent of what needs to be done. Of course, then we will have to implement those measures that are necessary for us.
It sounds like you're unwilling to make the tough decisions around austerity.
Oh no, that's
is that what you're saying here? That you are unwilling to take such steps if it's around the economy?
Well, we would have to take those tough measures precisely to get ourselves out of the hole, and if it means curtailing whatever is necessary, we shall do that. We would look at reducing the government workforces and all that, and make sure it's efficient, it's lean and efficient and competent. Yes, we would do the necessary things, but I'm saying that answer to the question, it's in the context of how we arrive at that. But we will not. We shall bite the bullet, and we shall do what's necessary. There are many ways. In fact, as I look at Zambia, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of its resources, I mean, look, we've got the copper dimension. Adding value to that to increase revenues. Look at the agriculture potential which we have. Look at the context of tourism and all that. Things will work out, but we will do the necessary. We'll make the hard decisions where need be. We will not fall back and curl up and be afraid to make decisions. We're very decisive.
Indeed. So talking of making tough decisions, we've got a great question here from Fegade Terife, who says, is it a good idea that the UNIP party believes in infusing morals into politics? Or rather, he says it is a good idea. But at the same time, I heard the bishop saying UNIP is pragmatic. May I ask him, therefore, where the right balance is? And I imagine here that he's talking about where is this balance between pragmatism and this moral approach, this enhanced transparency and accountability to the people that you talk of. Where do you draw the line, Bishop?
It is in getting things done. Let me give you two quotations in answer to that question. One is our good Lord once said, you must be as wise as a serpent, but as gentle as a dove.
Yeah.
Those two, that's very important. As wise as a serpent, but as gentle as a dove. And then one of the great Chinese premier, I think it's Deng, who said that he did not care whether the cat was white or black as long as it caught the mice. So in the context of morality, I mean, this is exactly, morality in my view is about values, it's about principles. And these are values which guide us to achieve greater heights and greater service. And it's about being fair. And when we bring that in politics, it's about enhancing the role of politics in making life better for all, in allowing the people for which we are there as politicians to serve to have a greater say in terms of, democratic ways of making decisions. And so morality dictates that. It's about wisdom. It's about enforcing right ways, but it's about doing the right thing. And without morality, you cannot do the right thing. That's how I look at it.
Great. So, Bishop, let me bring you back to something more here on the ground, if I could call it that, which is the upcoming elections on the 12th of August. You would be aware that let's call it your political opponents and rivals, particularly the Patriotic Front, led by the incumbent President Lungu, and indeed the other opposition party led by a man popularly known as H.H. Hichilema, did particularly well in the last elections, to the extent that it was seen as really a two-horse race between these two parties and these two political protagonists. Now, you've come into the fray, maybe somewhat late in the day. Do you really think you stand a chance against these political giants, if I can call it that, in Zambian politics at these upcoming elections?
Oh, absolutely. I stand a very good chance. In fact, the political landscape in Zambia, as you rightly pointed out, has been between these two political giants, the ruling PF and the leading opposition, UPND. And that's how it has been. And the Zambian people have, as it were, resigned themselves to choosing between these two. But suddenly, UNIP appears. But UNIP is not new. UNIP is the oldest political party. But it appears presenting to the Zambian people an alternative.
Yep.
And this alternative, in fact, has been amazing, Chris, following the death of our president, Kenneth Kaunda, having declared 21 days of national mourning for him, that on radio, on television, on the newspapers, and so on, people were learning about this great man. And UNIP, the party which he led, which has up to now really been forgotten. But it was like a nostalgia, realizing, my goodness, although yes, we passed through certain hardships, but there were many positives which were done. And those positives are the one now which we are building on, and in fact make it even greater. For example, free education, of which President Lungu and HH and other politicians are beneficiary of. Yes. We will bring back, and health and the infrastructure developments that took place. Anyway, the short and for is that now people begin to realize that, in fact, UNIP did these things, and we have the experience, and we shall do it. I'm walking in those great footsteps to achieve even greater things, a greater economy for Zambia. And so, yes, it's not too late in the day at all. It's never too late. So the Zambians now have an alternative. There's no need to choose between this. There's a new item on the menu, very delicious. So I'll go for that.
I'll take your word for it, Bishop, about the taste of UNIP. But really coming back to more concrete things, some observers of Zambian elections in particular are concerned about whether these elections will be held in a free and fair environment. And in actual fact, another colleague of mine, Dr. Craig Moffat, asked this question. He says, Bishop, do you have any concerns about SADC not deploying an election observer team due to COVID concerns? Are measures in place to mitigate against potential election abuses? I think he's being very diplomatic. Fraud, Bishop. Vote rigging. Is this a concern, or it's not something that you're worried about?
Well, at one level, Chris, you see, this is not the first elections that are being held in Zambia. We have a very positive record of elections in Zambia, starting with 1991, when the then UNIP government was voted out, and a new party, MMD, came in. Going on to 2011, when the then party in power, MMD, was voted out, and a new party came into power, PF. And now we're here in 2021 when the elections are taking place. So it's arguable to say that, no, we do have a track record of elections being held and government changing hands and peace prevailing. And so we want the same thing to happen this time. But what one could say is, yes, I think even it's something that I would build on, is that democracy is for the people, and all democratic rights must be exercised to the fullest. In this context, I mean that, for example, the Zambia National Broadcasting Services or other government-controlled media houses and so forth should be free for all other parties and given the same airtime, and in order to build and to nurture this democratic process that is ours. So we would want to enable that. But as it stands now, as things are, we believe in the wisdom of the Zambian voters who have exercised it in many ways, that yes, no matter how much there may be attempts to rig or twist things, it will not prevail.
So it sounds like you are relatively comfortable that the electoral playing field is balanced enough to allow for the will of the people to prevail at these elections on the 12th?
I'm not saying it's balanced enough. I'm saying that no matter how people may try to unbalance it, I believe in the resolve of the Zambian voters, that they understand and that they know that, in fact, going forward, we need to build a democracy in Zambia in which it's a level playing field. But our people, the voters, are resilient to see through these machinations. But going forward is something that should be free and fair for everybody, that we shouldn't even be talking about it now.
Indeed, Bishop. However, if I may ask you a very direct question, what do you think your chances are at the polls? When I say your chances, I'm talking about yourself as the presidential candidate, and of course the chances of UNIP as a political party, since this is a general election. How do you view your electoral fortunes, if I could put it that way?
Thank you very much. Starting with the party itself, we have for the first time fielded some parliamentary candidates across the country, not in all the constituencies, but in a number of constituencies. We got councillors who also been fielded, and mayoral candidates, and so on. So it's for the first time in, say, 20 years that we're really effectively taking part. We've been in the wilderness, or I should say fast asleep, but we have awakened fully. So now that's where we are. And we expect to definitely win some seats. Now, in regard to my candidature as a presidential candidate, I think I stand a very good chance, like anybody else. It's all up in the air. And God being our help, I think we will declare victory, and you shall be invited to the inauguration. So I think it's all open.
Thank you for the invitation, Bishop. But, you know, if we just look at the mere statistical probability of that win, it's quite implausible, if I could put it that way. Maybe something short of a miracle, something in your space then, Bishop. How do you respond to that? Because as we agreed, in the past, it was the two political parties that have been dominant, the Patriotic Front, and of course, Mr. Hichilema's own party.
I think, look, as I mentioned, yeah, it was this two power players. Now the alternative is there. And it's about looking at what the people want, the future of Zambia. Here, they have a candidate who hails from the church. I'm a bishop, I'm a shepherd. Zambia at this critical time needs a shepherd, a pastor, a unifier, a reconciler, a man of integrity, a man competent enough because he has all the skill sets which I have gathered from my various roles in life, a man with connections. So in short, as the Zambian voters go, they will be thinking about all that. And the one who will stand out will be this fellow. And of course, I'm not coming from a naive and immature place, but a man of immense experience. I have links in most of the governments in the world and contacts at the highest level in business, and that is what they'll be looking at. But I think profoundly, Zambians at this time are looking for a healer who can bring the nation back together, a reconciler, to bring us back to what President Kaunda always tried to impress upon us, that one Zambia, one nation. A leader who will inspire them to live up to the very best within themselves in terms of their abilities and potential. So yes, that is where the miracle comes in, and I think miracles happen, and it shall happen this time around as well.
Fantastic. We've got another question for you, Bishop, coming from the floor, from one of our viewers today, and that's Anna Mulai Chalmers, and she says, Bishop, thank you very much for your service in the past and future. In the context of Africa, LGBTI are often victims and scapegoats to winning elections. It is well documented how politicians in Zambia have instigated violence against LGBTI people. May I ask if you and your party have plans to change the situation for LGBTI community in Zambia, Bishop?
Thank you very much. That question touches on discrimination, demeaning a sector of society or people and so on. We've been talking recently in the context of Zambia, in context of tribalism. It's all about discrimination. Who is better and who is holier and all that. In a world as we live, we are all God's children. It's very important to understand. There's none who's better than any. We are all invaluable, priceless beings made in the very image of God. And any laws that discriminate and trample upon individuals for whatever reason or basis and so on, whether it be race, whether it be religion, whether it be a sexual orientation and all that, such laws should, of course, be addressed and appropriately amended to enable people to realize the great being of which they are. So that's our position. That's our position I stand on.
Yeah, and in actual fact, it seems to be very much aligned to the position of the founder of your political party, UNIP, President Kenneth Kaunda, the late, because he talked of humanism as an approach towards understanding his engagement with communities, dealing with difference. Is it based on that, apart from your deep religious conviction? Do you also agree with this humanist concept that President Kaunda had?
Yes, indeed. I mean, President Kaunda's humanist approach, in fact, it's a spiritual, it's a religious one. It's not the humanistic concept of, which after the Renaissance, which draws a line between humanity and anything spiritual. But no, this is built on, in the African context, Chris, Ubuntu. You are because I am. We exist because that's what defines our humanity. And so yes, we very much build on that, and we need to enhance that. We matter. And for me, that brings us back again to even a deeper understanding of, in terms of discrimination and all that, why we shouldn't, as I alluded to again, it's a spiritual thing. We are children of God. God lives in each one of us. And so when I look at you, I'm not just looking at Chris Maroleng, I'm looking at a divine being in who embodies the mystery of life, God in you, God in me. And to respect you is to respect the Creator. And that's what we need to evolve towards. And it breaks down barriers because we realize we're all one. And then to conclude in this context, diversity in life is a gift from God. We're enriched by difference. But that difference should not separate us. It should enhance the wonder in each of us towards the other, and the diversity in nature. So in life, it's not so much about how we should all be the same as how we should appreciate the diversity in life, which enriches us and makes us all special. And we need to live with that difference, but in a difference that is in the context of building us up together and appreciating life and nature together.
Wonderful, Bishop. I'm cognizant of the time, so I must ask you this very sort of direct and pointed question, which talks about your fitness and that of UNIP to govern. Is UNIP fit to govern? Is Bishop Trevor Mwamba fit to govern? If so, why?
Totally. UNIP is definitely fit to govern. And before I came to this space where I am and talking with you, of course, I had to contest the UNIP presidency. And I was elected as the UNIP president, coming to 3 months this month. And of course, now the presidency of Zambia is Trevor Mwamba fit to govern? Yes, absolutely. How and how can that be? Well, my whole life has been one framed in context of leadership. When we introduced me at the beginning, I was legal advisor to a great Archbishop Makudu. At the time, he was in fact the president of the World Council of Churches, the president of the All Africa Council of Churches, and many other international, and how was his secretary. So I am a person who behind the scenes have advised those who make decisions. When I was in banking as a head of legal and compliance, as head of corporate affairs, as secretary to the board, I was number 2 to the, anyway, my experience is very deep and it is one of leadership. So now I'm coming to the fore. My life also has been influenced by great men. Among them, of course, President Kaunda. When I was in Botswana at the time, a very beautiful, one of the greatest leaders, Gutumiri Masiri, who I compare to Lee Kuan Yew, Singapore, and how he led Botswana and how he developed Botswana. So I've been learning firsthand from this great man, President Mandela. One doesn't want to kind of like draw out am I fit to govern? Well, of course. How? Because first I've sat at the feet of these great leaders. Now the next point is that the time has come where a certain type of leadership is required, not just for Zambia, for Africa as well. And I think I am now ready for that role in my separate journey to be a true servant to God's people, to provide that leadership that people would like to have in a leader.
Wonderful, Bishop. Kuda is somewhat more cynical in his approach, and he asked this question from the floor. He says, "Good afternoon, Bishop. Most recently, the Malawi head of state, who also gave some confidence by being a man of the cloth, was embroiled in a nepotism scandal involving his daughter. How will you steer clear of such challenges that repeatedly plague this continent?" And I think this is the crux of the matter here, Bishop, why we're asking you. Yes, we understand and we get the fact that you're a man of the cloth. Yes, we understand that you come from a moral and value system that talks of transparency and accountability. But the people out there have been promised so many things by so many African leaders who claim similar moral convictions. What's different about you, Bishop?
Integrity, 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 integrity. And that's what I am, you know, and I also don't compare myself to others. Those are them, but this is me. So when I come into this role, I'm coming in from years of being a student of leadership, reading about leaders, meeting these leaders. I mean, I mentioned among my great mentors, Sakitimi Masiri, Mandela, President Kaunda, but there's another interesting man who I met, and this was the former president of Tanzania, the late president of Tanzania, Nyerere, Mwalimu Nyerere. Talk about integrity. I even wrote a paper entitled The Art of Leadership. So that question is very important. I'm about integrity. I would not do something that goes contrary to what I have been. And so in the context of nepotism and other things, it's something which I would avoid at all lengths. So it's about going for the very best in terms of appointments and for people who should be there, and not because you are my friend, no. But if you are capable of doing that, then you are the best. And it has gone through what I call an arm's length approach, and I'm not involved, and you are picked and you may be related to me, then it's not something that I would have had anything to do with it. So in short, it's about getting the best people for the best jobs, but I will have nothing to do with saying, Chris is my friend, give him this job. Chris is my cousin, give him, no, we must run away from that. Get the very best. So basically my approach is one of integrity. My approach is also one of meritocracy. Let people be where they are because they are the ones who should be there.
Indeed, one of the terms that come from the church is the concept of stewardship and sound stewardship. One of the things that we are enjoying to be sound stewards of is our natural resources, our environment. And I bring this to you from the floor, Bishop, from one of the audience today, Diane Willis. And she asked, "Good afternoon, Bishop. Please explain your policy with regards to the environment, in particular deforestation and the lack of environmental impact assessments in proposed projects in the lower Zambezi, where Lake Agro Industries have cleared over 550 hectares of pristine forests, less than 3 kilometers from a proposed World Heritage Site, the Kasanka National Park. And that's from Diane Willis, asking about your stewardship of the environment, Bishop.
Diana, that's a fantastic question. And first and foremost, that would not happen if I was in power. It would not happen. The environment, as I talked about, diversity, and it's part of nature. God has created that. And we are stewards. We must preserve this pristine gift that God has given us. We must make sure that the animal kingdom and other resources are protected. And of course, one of the first things I would do, in fact, and I shall do, is to have a minister in charge of the environment. Somebody, a climate czar, if you like, who monitor that things are done as they ought to be, and will not give any licenses, will not allow any projects that will cut down a tree and affect birds and so on. People may think, wait a minute, it's just a bird, it's just a tree. No, no, no. All that has value in the wider context. So the environment becomes a very important aspect of our whole existence, because once we destroy that, we are next in line. And so I love your question, and you'll be guaranteed there will be policies which will be put in, legislation which will be put in to protect the environment. And where licenses have been issued to people which are damaging that, we shall revoke them. I shall revoke them.
Wonderful, Bishop. I think as we wind up our conversation here today, one of the pressing issues, not just in Zambia, but in many African countries, has been the role of foreign direct investment. And increasingly, we are seeing a particular role in this regard being played by China. And this also has a particular relevance in Zambia when we consider the increasing role of Zambian investment in your country. What's your view about foreign direct investment, but specifically that of China in Zambia and its influence?
Yes, well, I'm in favor of foreign direct investment. I mean, we're living in a global world, and there's much that the world can offer Zambia, and there's much that Zambia can offer the world. But it's all a question of how that is done as well, how the contracts are drawn up and agreements in terms of the roles that are played by companies in multinationals or countries wanting to invest. This is an area that has to be looked at critically in terms of the benefit to the country, and environment, which we talked about, and all that aspect. What value is it adding? I encourage foreign direct investment, and we'll make sure that we have policies that can attract investors into Zambia. But those investors must come into the country in the context of adding value to the resources, adding value to the lifestyles of our people, so that the people are at the center of all this. And so I don't care where people come from, as long as they adhere to certain fundamental principles that are there to benefit the Zambian people. And this is how I would look at that.
And would you encourage the sort of levels of Chinese participation in the economy and indeed investment in Zambia that we've seen? Would you enhance that? Have you had any particular concerns about their presence in your country?
I hear what I've been told, for some experiences of people speaking of how certain arrangements have come about, and some of them have not been very, very cautious. So we come back to the rule of law and how it is, and transparency, how things are done. And as long as any country, any company is interested in coming to Zambia, we'll say, you are welcome. However, these are the terms on which we want to engage. And of course, these are terms which, as we just spoken earlier, if people come in and they're going to destroy the environment, but you're going to get X amount of millions of dollars or whatever because you want that money. We cannot allow that. So in the end, all I'm saying is that it's about having a relationship with a country, with multinationals, with potential investors that is on a win-win base. And we want to encourage that. But the Zambian people must benefit, the environment must benefit, it must be for the benefit of the country. And of course, the investors, the returns must be okay, but not too okay. This is what
Good answer, Bishop. We are really at the end of our conversation, and before I thank you, I just wanted to ask you if you have any final words, especially to those who will be going to the polls on the 12th of August. What is it that you're saying to them? And more importantly, is there the possibility of hope for the people of Zambia? Is this a crucial turning point? And are you the catalyst for this change that you are advocating for?
Absolutely, Chris. I think the one message is simply, yes, vote for Trevor Mwamba as president of Zambia. Vote for UNIP. Vote for transparency. Vote for the rule of law. Vote for prosperity. Vote for peace and one Zambia, one nation. Vote for a greater Zambia. I represent that, and we'll make sure that we honor the pledge, and we honor the confidence of the Zambian people who will be voting for me. One of the things I'd like to say is that once we're in power, Chris, is that I will ensure that our institutions work. They will have to work. The anti-corruption bodies like that, the judiciary will have to work, the legislation will have to work. All institutions will have to work with integrity, that they must perform their job. And in that context, I will ensure that we bring in experts, as I mentioned, skilled people who know what to do. And that will be from within the country and from outside the country, as long as they are able to uplift Zambia. So I will ensure that institutions work, transparency is there, and the investors are welcome, and we develop a prosperous and better Zambia going forward.
Bishop Trevor Mwamba, it's been a singular privilege and pleasure to have had this discussion with you. We wish you and UNIP all the best, and indeed the people of Zambia as you go to your elections on the 12th of August. Thank you so much for agreeing to this interview.
Chris, thank you very much for this honor, and God bless you and your family and all the good work that you are doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bishop. All the best.